Good evening. Welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's 7 o'clock and this is Scotland at 7. It's Tuesday the 11th of May. I'm Andrew Wilson and this evening I'm presenting the programme from Edinburgh. First of all, we have the daily coronavirus update. As of 2 p.m. today, since the start of the pandemic, a total of 1,950,479 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 1,722,401 have been confirmed negative and 228,078 have tested positive. There are 238 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,661. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 70 were in hospital last night, 6 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 2,928,963 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 1,506,613 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 127,629 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, and that is an increase of 20 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. We also have a short ONS update this evening. The percentage of people testing positive for COVID-19, that's the positivity rate, decreased in England, Wales and Scotland in the weeks up to the 2nd of May 2021. The positivity rate remained at similar levels in Northern Ireland over the 2 most recent weeks. Hospital admissions in England decreased slightly in the week ending the 2nd of May, and the number of registered deaths involving COVID-19 in England and Wales also decreased in the week ending the 30th of April. The number of deaths that mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate decreased to 205 in the week ending 30 April 2021. Deaths involving COVID-19 accounted for 2.1% of all deaths registered in England and Wales in the latest week. The total number of deaths registered was 7.3% lower than the 5-year average. COVID-19 was the third most common cause of death in both England and Wales in March 2021. Our first story this evening also relates to the pandemic, as the next steps out of lockdown are confirmed. People will be able to hug their loved ones and meet in private homes as most of mainland Scotland moves to level 2, with eased restrictions on hospitality, entertainment, education and sport. In an acceleration of previous plans, the number of people and households that can meet inside homes in level 2 has been increased to 6 people from 3 households. The new rules, which come into effect on Monday 17 May, will apply to all mainland local authority areas with the exception of Moray, which is experiencing a high and increasing number of coronavirus COVID-19 cases. As a result, Moray is likely to remain in level 3 for a further period, with travel in and out of the area prohibited other than for permitted purposes. A final decision on this will be made at the end of this week. The Scottish Government is working with Moray Council and Grampian Health Board to reduce case numbers and will provide financial support for affected hospitality and leisure businesses if Level 3 restrictions do remain in place. As the virus is now sufficiently under control in the Western Isles, Orkney, Shetland and remote areas of the Highlands and Argyll, these communities are expected to move directly to Level 1. From the 17th of May, anyone entering Scotland from countries on a new international travel green list will not be required to quarantine on arrival, but will have to take a PCR test for COVID-19. The green list will initially be the same as that in place for England, but will be subject to review based on Scotland's specific needs. Under the Level 2 restrictions, up to 6 people from 3 households will be able to meet in each other's homes or gardens without physical distancing. This was the limit previously planned for Level 1, but has now been accelerated for areas in Level 2. People will be encouraged to use their judgment about close physical contact with others. Up to 6 people from 3 households will be able to meet indoors in places such as pubs, cafes and restaurants, while up to 8 people from 8 households will be able to meet outdoors. Pubs and restaurants will be able to serve alcohol indoors until 10:30 p.m. in 2-hour booked slots. Venues, including cinemas, theatres, concert halls, music venues, comedy clubs, amusement arcades, casinos, snooker halls and bingo halls will be able to reopen. Events will resume with a maximum capacity of 100 people indoors, 250 outdoors where there is unrestricted standing, and 500 for events with seating. Organisers will be allowed to apply to hold bigger events. Outdoor contact sports and indoor group exercise classes will be able to restart. More than one person will be able to sing during religious services. Amateur performing arts groups will be able to perform outdoors. And colleges and universities will have more flexibility to resume in-person learning. Our next story this evening is that an inquest has found that the 10 people shot dead by the British Army in Ballymurphy in 1971 were innocent, and the killings were unjustified. An inquest has found that all 10 people shot dead during operations by the British Army in Ballymurphy in 1971 were innocent and that the killings were unjustified, confirming it as one of the bloodiest atrocities of the Civil War in Northern Ireland. Mrs. Justice Keegan delivered her damning findings in a long-awaited coroner's report today. Families of those killed, who have campaigned for decades to clear the names of their relatives, wept, hugged and applauded. They said what had happened in Ballymurphy was a massacre. The inquest examined the shooting of the 10, who included a parish priest and a mother of 8, during chaotic scenes in the streets of the small West Belfast neighbourhood between the evening of 9 August and the morning of 11th August 1971. The inquest heard that some of the dead appeared to have been shot by members of the Parachute Regiment, the same regiment that 5 months later massacred protesters in County Derry on Bloody Sunday. Meanwhile, there are plans to introduce laws to protect British Army veterans who served in Northern Ireland. The UK government plans to introduce legislation to give greater legal protection to former soldiers who served during decades of sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland in the face of opposition from the Irish government and Northern Irish politicians. Prosecutions linked to the violence are increasingly unlikely to result in convictions, the government said in a briefing document issued alongside the Queen's speech, which sets out the government's legislative agenda. The announcement was made on the day the judge-led inquiry in Northern Ireland found that British soldiers unjustifiably shot or used disproportionate force in the deaths of up to 10 innocent people in Ballymurphy in 1971. The government said it will introduce a legacy package that delivers better outcomes for victims, survivors and veterans, focuses on information recovery and reconciliation, and ends the cycle of investigations. Allegations over unresolved crimes from 3 decades of confrontation between Irish nationalist militants, pro-British loyalist paramilitaries, the police and the British military that killed around 3,600 people in Northern Ireland remain a contentious issue 23 years after the Good Friday peace deal was struck. The Irish government last week urged London not to seek to shield former soldiers from prosecution, describing reports of such plans as deeply alarming. In the Middle East, at least 24 Palestinians and 2 Israelis are dead. Israeli jets have responded to rockets fired from Gaza with airstrikes in an escalation of the ferocious confrontation that has continued almost non-stop since yesterday. 24 Palestinians, including 9 children, have been killed in the air raids, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, and 2 Israeli women died in the Palestinian rocket attack on Ashkelon. In Gaza, health officials said 7 members of a single family, including 3 children, had died in an explosion. After weeks of intense violence in Jerusalem, Hamas, the ruling group inside Gaza, fired a barrage of rockets towards Israel on Monday evening. Israel's military said it had killed 15 Hamas operatives and a battalion commander. Residents in Gaza City reported bombings on high-rise buildings as families spent the night cowering in basements. In Israel, medics said that more than 25 civilians were being treated following rocket fire, including those wounded from broken glass and shrapnel. Militants had fired at least 250 rockets towards Israel, many of which were intercepted, but some made direct hits on apartment buildings. One hit an empty school. The National Ambulance Service reported that rocket strikes killed 2 women in the southern city of Ashkelon this afternoon. In recent weeks, there has been a sharp escalation in anger over Israel's half-century occupation and its ever-deepening military grip over Palestinian life. In Jerusalem, hundreds of Palestinians have been wounded in near-nightly protests that ramped up over the weekend and spread to other areas of Israel and the occupied West Bank. Israeli police have responded with stun grenades and rubber-coated bullets. On Monday morning, despite calls for calm from the US, Europe and elsewhere, officers in riot gear stormed into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the 3rd holiest site in Islam, and attacked worshippers. In Europe, at least 8 have been killed in a Russian school shooting. 9 people, including 7 children, were killed today, and many more badly wounded after a lone teenage gunman opened fire in a school in the Russian city of Kazan, local authorities said, prompting a Kremlin call for tighter gun controls. 2 children could be seen leaping from the 3rd floor of the 4-story school number 175 to escape as gunshots rang out in a video filmed by an onlooker that was circulated by Russia's RIA news agency. Calling the attack a tragedy for the country, Rustam Minikhanov, the head of the wider Tatarstan region, said there was no evidence that anyone else had been involved. Russia's investigative committee, which investigates major crimes, said in a statement it had opened a criminal case into the shooting and that the identity of the detained attacker had been established. Russia has strict restrictions on civilian firearm ownership, but some categories of guns are available for purchase for hunting, self-defense or sport once would-be owners have passed tests and met other requirements. President Vladimir Putin ordered the head of the National Guard to draw up tighter gun regulations, the Kremlin said. The guards would urgently look into the status of weapons that can be registered for hunting in Russia but are considered assault weapons elsewhere. In Westminster, meanwhile, we have heard this year's Queen's speech. Responding to the Queen's speech, the SNP has said that it was that it has completely failed to deliver the investment and fundamental change required to build a strong, fair and equal recovery, adding that instead it will impose the long-term damage of Tory cuts, Brexit and a power grab against Scotland's will. Commenting on the plans, Ian Blackford MP said, "Damaging Tory austerity cuts are threatening Scotland's recovery, with the Tory government repeating the same mistakes of the last economic crisis by imposing a public sector pay freeze, cuts to universal credit, and a savings and efficiency review of public services, instead of delivering an investment-led recovery." The SNP's Westminster leader said Boris Johnson must respect the will of the Scottish people and their democratic right to choose their own future after the SNP was elected with a cast-iron mandate to hold a post-pandemic independence referendum. Measures included in the Queen's speech today include an electoral integrity bill, which will make it mandatory for voters to show photo identification in future elections, an asylum bill to make it significantly harder for people to claim asylum in the UK, and a judicial review bill, which will make challenging the government via the courts harder. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has also been accused of imposing voter suppression laws. The SNP has criticised Boris Johnson's plans to disenfranchise thousands of voters by imposing new Trump-like voter suppression measures, including requiring voters to show photo identification at Westminster elections, labelling it blatant Tory voter suppression. Following today's Queen's speech, the SNP Westminster Deputy Leader, Kirsten Oswald MP, condemned the proposal, which the SNP believe will deter lower-income, ethnic minority and younger people from voting, groups that are less likely to vote Tory. The SNP has pledged that it will reject any such measures for Scottish elections and referendums. Instead, the SNP government is focused on measures to extend the franchise and encourage turnout. The SNP has already introduced votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, refugees and foreign nationals with leave to remain. The Scottish election last week had the highest turnout in the history of devolution. In other Westminster news, David Cameron's text messages have been published. Following the publication of David Cameron's text messages to key Westminster and Whitehall figures to get COVID loans for Greensill, the SNP has said the messages underline the cronyism and sense of entitlement that is rife in the Tory government. It comes after a Redfield and Wilton Strategies poll commissioned by the I newspaper found that half of UK voters believe that there is a culture of sleaze within the Tory government, with even Tory voters more likely to agree than disagree with that claim. Commenting, the SNP Deputy Westminster leader Kirsten Oswald MP said that it speaks volumes that a former Tory Prime Minister thinks that it's acceptable to drop a text to current Tory cabinet members for backdoor access to vital COVID schemes, adding that this is the standard the Tory government has set and has been perpetuated throughout the years. Several messages, including to Michael Gove and Rishi Sunak, suggest that the former Prime Minister feels he can resolve the issue with a quick phone call, which Ms Oswald said was a breach of the rules. The UK government's asylum plans have been described as a full frontal assault on international law. The SNP has said the Tory government's cruel asylum proposals set out today in the Queen's speech are a full frontal assault on the Refugee Convention and international law that will endanger lives. The plans would see asylum seekers who arrive in the UK via irregular routes, as the overwhelming majority of people fleeing persecution do, denied an automatic right to asylum and instead regularly reassessed for removal. The UNHCR, as well as campaigners across Scotland and the UK, have criticised the cruel plans and warned that they will damage lives, endanger lives, and undermine international cooperation on refugee issues. The SNP has condemned the Home Secretary for deliberately ignoring Article 31 of the Refugee Convention, which states that refugees cannot be penalised for entering a country irregularly to claim asylum if they are coming directly from a territory where their life or freedom was threatened, provided that they present themselves without delay to the authorities and show good cause for their irregular entry or presence. Finally, figures published today show the party's election spending on Facebook advertising during the Scottish election. New figures have revealed that the British Labour Party splashed almost 3 times more than the SNP on Facebook election ads. That equates to £8,537 per seat won, in comparison to the SNP's £926 per seat. The Tories, meanwhile, spent a total of £110,225 on Facebook ads in the run-up to the election, with the SNP's campaign director, Keith Brown MSP, describing the figures as a hammer blow for the Tories' negative campaign. Meanwhile, an Open Democracy investigation shows that third-party unionist campaigns, with no clear details of where their funding came from, spent tens of thousands of pounds on digital ads pushing tactical voting ahead of the Holyrood election, flouting electoral rules. Keith Brown also said, while these figures are a hammer blow for the Tories and their ultra-negative campaign, they are also a great endorsement of the SNP's digital communications strategy. And that is the news in Scotland at 7 this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. If you would like to support us, then please consider subscribing or donating to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. Meantime, thank you everyone for joining us on Broadcasting Scotland, and I hope that you have a very peaceful evening.